Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Pigs Playing Magic Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you check that out. The Kickstarter campaign is going to last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through some more unique and inspiring, awesome, all the adjectives, custom Magic cards, custom commanders. There's an entire community out there that works on custom Magic cards, and they do a fantastic job. So I'm just going to be highlighting a few. I can't highlight, every single one that they ever come up with. But, I'm finding some unique and exciting ones every single day. So, yeah, I highly recommend that you check that out. But, yeah, let's jump into a few. I'm going to talk about the commander and kind of how I would build a deck around that commander if it was a legal commander, or even if it's not a legal commander. You can always ask your play group, if they'd be allowed, or if you'd be allowed to build around that as well. So, yeah. The Commander's a social game. Make sure you have that discussion. And yeah, let's jump into things today. So first up, we've got Zirin the Thousand Fang from Jacob's Reddit username. Fantastic username, by the way. Anyways, a 3/3 Vampire Hydra with lifelink and trample that costs 2 black-green. When it enters the battlefield, move all counters from all permanents onto Zirin the Thousand Fang. Now, this might seem like a pretty simple commander and straightforward, but I think there's actually a lot to this, some things that you need to take into account. So, when it comes into play, it gets all counters from all creatures, not just your own. And it doesn't matter what kind of counter that is. It can be something that is, not on a creature. Maybe it's a counter that's on an enchantment or a land or whatnot. But yeah, you need to take that into account as well. So this can kind of hose your opponents as well as become this giant threat. So yeah, maybe you've got some +1/+1 counters around, and you can take all of those, and it can make it into a huge thing. Maybe you've got some other kinds of counters as well. So I think that there's a couple of kind of unique ways that you can really build around this. The first kind of things to consider, I think, would be cards like Evolutionary Escalation. It's an enchantment for 1 and a green. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, and 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature an opponent controls. So this is essentially 6 +1/+1 counters every single turn, or each of your turns, essentially. So yeah, you put 3 counters on one of your creatures, you're making it bigger, and you're also choosing an opponent's creature. And then at a certain point, you cast your Zirin, and essentially you get all those counters. So let's say that this was out for, 3 turns before Zirin came into play. That's 18 +1/+1 counters that are coming onto Zirin, making it a 21/21 lifelinking trample, commander. So that's, automatic commander damage kill right there if you can get it through. Next up, something like a Boot Nipper. It's a 2/1 beast that costs 1 to black. Enters the battlefield with your choice of a Death Touch counter or a Lifelink counter on it. Basically, in Ikoria, this new kind of, ability counters became a thing. Obviously, with this one, you'd pick Death Touch since Zirin already has Lifelink. So yeah, giving a trampling creature, though, Death Touch just makes it incredibly deadly. You can just assign 1 point of damage and then kind of put the rest through, which is fantastic. Obviously, there are other cards out there that, give different kinds of ability counters that you could keep in mind as well. One thing that I don't have on here that I would like you to consider, though, is if you are kind of building around +1/+1 counters, maybe one way that you could do that actually is with, kind of an Undying strategy. So if you had creatures that have Undying, you sacrifice them all, they come back, they get a +1/+1 counter, and if they die again with that counter, then you lose them, or they go to your graveyard. But instead of that, you basically, sacrifice your Undying creatures, they come back with counters, and then you cast Zirin to get all those counters off, so you can then sacrifice those creatures again, and Zirin gets bigger too. So that's just something to consider as well. I didn't have enough room to put all these cards up here. I'm trying to just keep it as 3, so there we go. Anyways, Dark Depths is another card to kind of consider, though. It's a legendary snow land, enters the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. You can pay 3 to remove an ice counter from it. When it has no ice counters on it, you sacrifice, and if you do, you create Merit Lage, a legendary 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying indestructible. So this is kind of that other, way that you can build around it, where you're trying to kind of remove counters from things that maybe you control that, do better with the less counters that are on them. Do better with, you know what I mean. Regardless, Dark Depths, any way that you can get Merit Lage out is kind of a fun way to do things. So yeah, that's Zirin. I think there's a couple ways you can build around it. And yeah, I think that, it might seem like a simple commander when you first look at it, but the fact that it can kind of, hose your opponents and really kind of help you out is big. And also consider that this is essentially just a kill all planeswalkers in play spell. So if your opponents, if one of your opponents has a Super Friends deck, goodbye to all your planeswalkers, because all those loyalty counters are going to go into Zirin. You don't really need the loyalty counters, but your opponents can't have them. So yeah, that's Zirin. But now let's move on to Dakrin, Curious Adventurer from Agronio. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. Apologies, Agronio, if I'm not. Dakrin is a 2/2 Falcon Scout that costs 1 green-blue. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, investigate, so we're going to make a clue. It says sacrifice 3 clues, create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact. It is no longer a creature. So basically, this is kind of like a clues, it can be a clues matter kind of commander, kind of focused around, opponents getting creatures and you getting kind of value out of that, getting your clues. You can either, sacrifice your clues to draw cards, or once you get 3 of them, you can make a token that's a copy of a creature, but it's just an artifact, so it's no longer a creature. So basically, you can get ETBs or LTBs or whatnot off of that, and ETBs is probably the easiest way to build around that. But yeah, basically, there's a couple different things that you can do as commander that are pretty cool. You can kind of lean into kind of that clue tribal commander kind of feel with things like Uvenwald Mysteries. It's an enchantment for a 2 and a green. It says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token onto the battlefield. So basically, if you've got any creatures dying that aren't tokens, you can get more clues that you can then use to sacrifice with your commander. Or whenever you're sacrificing clues, you're getting kind of those token creatures, the 1/1 white humans. So basically, you're sacrificing 3 to make a copy of a creature, and then you get, 3 humans that you can then use for blocking, for sacking, so on and so forth. Hunted Phantasm is a fantastic card for this deck, I believe. It's a 4/6 spirit that costs 1 blue. It's unblockable. When it comes into play, you put 5 1/1 red goblin creature tokens into play under target opponent's control. So basically, you're kind of forcing opponents to have creatures. And so, yeah, basically, when this comes into play, you're making your opponent basically give you 5 clues. Now, they get 5 goblins, you get 5 clues. It's definitely a trade-off, but this can definitely go infinite. If you basically, you sacrifice 3 clues, you make another copy of Hunted Phantasm. You sacrifice 3 clues, you make another, you basically, you keep getting 5 clues, sacrificing 3. You have an infinite amount of clues, and there's plenty of ways to win from there. Now, keep in mind that you're not getting infinite Hunted Phantasms as creatures. They're just artifacts when they come into play. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. You can't win by just swinging out with these because they're not creatures. But yeah, you are going to be able to, essentially make and sacrifice an infinite number of clues with this, and there's plenty of ways to win through there. Agent of Treachery is a good inclusion as well, I believe. It's a 2/3 human rogue that costs 5 blue. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. So this is kind of one of those creatures that has a really, really impactful ETB that you can target, once you get kind of that mass amount of clues to keep copying this creature, and stealing kind of the best things on the board. And then, it can also be a good draw engine for you as well, getting you a ton of value through there. And maybe you've got some kind of a Psychosis Crawler or whatnot, where when you're drawing cards, you're draining your opponents and whatnot, there's plenty of ways that you can kind of win around this. Again, keep in mind that when you are building this deck, that when you're making that copy of a creature, it's just an artifact, it is not a creature, so please keep that in mind. But yeah, again, I think if you can abuse ETBs, LTBs with that, you'll still have a very good time and a very powerful deck. So yeah, that's Dakrin. Next up, let's move on to Iliochromatic Spirit from Psychovore. It's a 1/3 spirit that is all colors and it's got flying, and it costs 2. It says whenever a player casts a multicolored spell, that player may draw a card, and you can tap it and choose a player. That player chooses and adds one of either white, blue, black, red, green. So yeah, this is a 5-color commander that only costs 2 mana, and it can be a draw engine, not just for you, but for other players as well. And it can kind of give you, it can either tap for mana for you, or it can tap mana for other players too. So essentially, this can be a very kind of political commander, I see it as, at least political control kind of. Some people might say group hug. When it comes to a deck that is trying to win, I do say that's more political control than actually group hug, but that's a debate for a different day. Regardless, this can provide card advantage for pretty much all players, but you can take the most advantage of this, obviously, since you're building your deck around kind of that multicolored matters. So most of the spells you're going to have in your deck are probably going to be multicolored. This can help you cast those spells, and you're going to be drawing off of casting those spells as well, so you can, again, have a really large kind of card advantage over your opponents, and be able to kind of utilize those cards in the best ways to kind of politic and win the game from there. Urza's Filter is not a multicolor card, but is the first one I'm going to bring up. It's an artifact that costs 4, and it says multicolored spells cost up to 2 less to play. So basically, you are helping everyone reduce the cost of their multicolored spells, especially yourself, so they can cast more in a turn, and then they're going to be drawing more cards, you're going to be drawing more cards. It's just a good kind of, goodwill card that can kind of help speed things up and help players cast more and more spells for more and more card advantage. Fabro Elder is going to be fantastic for a deck like this. It's a 0/0 Tree Folk Druid for 1 green and white. It has Vigilance, and it gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control, and it can tap for each color among permanents you control at 1 mana of that color. So basically, with your commander in play, because your commander is all colors, even though it only costs 2 of nothing of any color, this does tap for essentially Wooburg. It is a 5/5 that taps for Wooburg for just 3 mana. That's really fantastic. And again, in a multicolored strategy commander or a multicolored strategy deck, you can really take advantage of kind of this mana generating engine. Well, with this, as well as your commander, you can really cast pretty much anything that you need. And then something like a Sisay Weatherlight Captain can be fantastic for this deck as well. A 2/2 human soldier that costs 2 and a white. It gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And then by paying Wooburg, you can search your library for a legendary permanent with converted mana cost less than Sisay's power. Put that card into the battlefield and check your library. So maybe this is a kind of multicolor legendary permanent matters kind of deck, where basically, because you've got your commander in play, Sisay is going to get +5/+5 because you've got all 5 colors. And then you can just, cast or pay Wooburg to search your library for a legendary permanent with 6 or less converted mana cost, because Sisay's power is going to be 7. So then you can kind of pick and choose exactly what you need out of your deck to win for the situation that you're in. Maybe that's a political card that can help out an opponent. Maybe that's something that can really set you ahead. Maybe that's something that can kind of set one of your opponents back. Definitely having kind of that, multicolor matters kind of commander, multicolored tutor can really help as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting political commander. You don't really typically see from my knowledge, 5-color politics, but could definitely be an interesting build. And finally, we've got Riul Charm Hoarder from Aiden Pem. It's a 5/7 dragon with flying that costs 2 white, blue, black, and red, so everything but green, essentially. Says if a spell or ability you control requires you to choose exactly one mode, copy it X times, where X is the number of modes that spell or ability has. Choose a different mode for each copy, exile the original spell or ability. Modes appears as bolded list. So basically, this one is, hey, you cast something that's got multiple modes, you can only get one of them. This instead says, no, you get every single one of those modes. So obviously, the more modes that one of those spells has on it, the better. The first cards that come to mind are definitely in the name of Riul Charm Hoarder, and those would be the charms, the charm cycle. So you've got, the 3-color charms, the 2-color charms, but yeah, Esper Charm is a good example of essentially one that could be very valuable for this. It's an instant that costs white, blue, black. It says choose 1, destroy target enchantment, draw 2 cards, or target player discards 2 cards. So essentially, instead of just getting one of those for 3 mana, which is still a good value, you get all 3, which is fantastic. For 3 mana, getting to destroy an enchantment, draw 2, and make someone discard 2, that's huge. So again, you'd probably run a good amount of the charms in a deck like this. Again, it's in the name for the commander, so it's kind of like, hey, you should be playing these cards. And then Grenzo Havoc Razor, some creatures have this kind of choose one effect on them as well when certain things happen. A 2/2 Goblin Rogue that costs red. Whenever a creature you control deals counter damage to a player, choose 1. Goad target creature that player controls and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card and may spend mana over any color to cast it. So essentially, you get both of these instead of just one. Yes, it's only 2 things, but both are very valuable. Goading a ton of creatures, as well as being able to cast cards off the top of their library. That's a huge amount of value. So it's, again, card advantage as well as kind of combat deterrence and, sending creatures elsewhere. So that can be a lot of fun. And essentially cards, that might only have 2 again, but 2 really kind of powerful effects could be good at inclusions as well as the choose 1. A sorcery like Mob Rule, it costs 4 red. It says gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn. Untap those creatures that gain haste until end of turn, or gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until end of turn. Untap those creatures that gain haste until end of turn. So basically, this just becomes, a 6 mana insurrection essentially, gaining control of all creatures on the board and just being able to swing out from there. Usually this can be a very powerful card, even just with one of those modes. So having both of the modes and getting every single creature on the board can be a lot of fun. Again, I think there's a lot of cards that, obviously I can't mention every single card that would go in this deck right now. But yeah, Riul definitely has, kind of those, might make some cards that aren't nearly powerful enough to fit in a lot of commander decks extremely powerful. Maybe they have, a lot of different options for the choose 1, but those don't really kind of add up, on their own to being worth the value of the card. But when they kind of get every single one of those, then it can become a much more valuable card and really help you take over the game and win, or just kind of set you up in the right way. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your favorite of these custom commanders is. What kind of deck would you build around that commander? What kind of crazy things would you be doing? So yeah, let me know which of these commanders might have inspired you. And as always, thanks again and have a good one.